Hey everybody, Jason here. Welcome to my knot channel. So in this video we're going to have a look at the trucker's hitch versus the taut-line hitch and try to determine which knot is the better hitch knot. To begin, we're going to head inside to the work table so that we can have a clear look at how to tie the trucker's hitch and the taut line. From there, we're going to come back outside, we're going to look at these two knots with real-world application. Now, even if you're familiar with these two knots, I recommend you watch the entire video because I may do things a little different from what you're used to. Okay, so let's head on in and get started. Let's begin by having a look at how to tie the trucker's hitch. To tie the trucker's hitch, begin by tying a single figure 8 loop or tucked figure 8 knot in your working end. From there, pass the working end around or through the anchor point. In this demonstration, I've set up a carabiner to illustrate the anchor. Then pass the working end through the bight in the figure 8 knot. Pull down on the working line to create tension in the line, and then tie off the working end with 2 half hitches. When you're finished, the trucker's hitch is easily untied by untying the 2 half hitches and then simply pulling on the working end to untie the figure 8. The trucker's hitch is a very useful knot to know. In addition to being used to secure a load on a trailer or vehicle, the trucker's hitch knot is often used when tying ridge lines while camping, and I'm sure it has many other uses. Now let's have a look at how to tie the taut-line hitch. To begin, pass your working end around the anchor point. Cross the lines to create a loop, and then wrap your working end around the line once on the inside of your loop. Continue to pass your working end around the line for a second wrap. From there, bring your working end outside of your loop and finish the knot with a half hitch, and then cinching it up. The taut-line hitch is often one of the first knots taught in programs like Scouts, and it's a good camping knot. I personally have replaced the taut line with the midshipman's hitch, which is very similar in design. You can check out my video, Taut Line versus the Midshipman's Hitch, to discover why. A link is provided in the description and at the end of this video. Okay, so now that we've seen how to tie the trucker's hitch and the taut line hitch, let's have a look at how we would tie them in a real application. And what I'm going to be focusing on is creating a ridge line. So before we get started, I want to say that the two knots, they actually have different functions. And even though the trucker's hitch has the word hitch attached to it, it's actually more of a binding knot. Okay, so a binding knot is a knot that's used to hold objects together. So if you had a bundle of wood, you tie a knot around it to hold the bundle of wood tight together. So you can see a trucker's hitch is used to hold a load on top of, a wagon or on a roof rack of a vehicle. In that sense, you're binding that object to the wagon or the roof of the vehicle. A hitch knot is a knot that's used to tie a rope to a fixed object, like a tree or, a cleat or something like that. The knots have different uses, but the trucker's hitch and the taut-line hitch can both be used for a ridge line or a guy line. So let's get started, and let's first look at the first anchor point when tying the ridge line. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using 1/4-inch weave rope. Now, I'm using this, and some people might say that, use paracord. The thing is, I'm using a thicker rope for the demonstration, just so that the knots are, more visible and stand out. So I'm going to start off with tying the taut-line hitch. And as I go, I'll talk through some of the benefits. So I'm going to start by passing my working end around the anchor point. Then I'm going to tie the taut-line hitch by creating those 2 wraps on the inside of my loop. And then going to the outside of my loop and tying a half hitch. So then I'm just going to snug up my knot. And I have the adjustable taut line. Okay, so that's one of the benefits of a taut-line hitch, is that it's adjustable. So if I ran my ridge line and then it started to slack, I can simply adjust the size of the loop and increase the tension on the line. Now, the adjustability of it is also a fault or a weakness, and especially with the taut line, as the taut line, if it shakes a lot or, you know, has other pressures involved, it can easily loosen up and slide down the rope or even untie. So with the taut line as the first anchor, there's no real reason to have a big loop in here, and so I'm able to snug it up right to the tree, and then that creates a fairly secure hitch. Okay, so now let's have a look at tying the trucker's hitch. So to tie the trucker's hitch, the first thing I'm going to do is tie that figure 8 loop in my working line. And then from there, I'm going to pass my working end around the anchor point, through that loop, and then tie my 2 half hitches. So we have 1 and 2. So as a knot, the trucker's hitch is a compound knot, so it involves more than one parts of the knot. So I have you know, the figure 8 and then also the hitch part. Now with the trucker's hitch, I would say it's much more secure than a taut line. You know, this knot isn't going to go anywhere. A downside is that it's also not going to be adjustable. So once it's in place, that's as far as it's going to go, and I'm not able to snug it up tight as the first knot on the one side of the ridgeline. So even if I monkeyed around with it and tried to get this portion of the knot as close as I could to the tree, it's still likely going to have a bit of space and not be entirely tight. So problem with that is, unless that ridgeline is really tight from end to end, it can definitely slide down or up your anchor point. Okay, so we have half of our ridge line tied. Now, whether we're using the taut line or the ridge line at one end, we're now going to use both at the other side and do another comparison. So as I stretch it out, again, to start off, what I'm going to do is tie the taut line hitch. And again, I'm going to cross over my line, do my couple wraps on the inside of my loop, and finish it off with my half hitch. Okay, and so there we have my ridge line across. Now you can see I've got a fair amount of flex in the line. I can tighten that up by sliding it over like this. Okay, now as I've mentioned, one of the disadvantages of the taut line is that it is known that it can become loose and, well, untie, or just become loose and a nuisance. Now with a ridge line, if it loosens, typically you get a slack line. But if you're using it with something like a guy line, which is the line that runs off of the ridge line to the ground or off of a tent to the ground, in that case you have the line staked into the ground, and if it becomes loose, the line can pop off of your stake, and so that can become more of a nuisance. Okay, so similar to the other side, tying the trucker's hitch, I'm going to start off by creating my figure 8 in my line and turn that into a loop. Okay, so I've got my figure 8 loop, and now I'm going to take my working end, I'm going to pass it around my anchor point, in this case a tree, feed the working end through the loop, and then tie my 2 half hitches after I've snugged up the line using the mechanical advantage of the trucker's hitch. Then I'm just going to tie my 2 half hitches, and in this case, because my line's so long, I'm going to tie a single half hitch, and then I'm going to tie a slippery half hitch just to keep my line up off the ground. Now, if I had a lot of line, what I might do is tie a daisy chain into the end, or even tie a coil so that it's up and suspended up off the ground. So now looking at the advantages and disadvantages of using the trucker's hitch for a ridge line as the second knot. There's no question that I can get a much tighter, more secure ridge line. There's no risk of the line becoming slack, and needing to be adjusted, once I cinch it up, it's really not going to go anywhere. A disadvantage is that it's not adjustable at all, and the knot itself is a little bit more complex, okay? It is a compound knot. It requires more knowledge to be able to tie it. And so for new knot tires or young knot tires, the trucker's hitch is going to take a little bit more education and, you know, skill development. So there you have it, the trucker's hitch versus the taut-line hitch. Now, I'm not here to tell you which knot is better. I'll let you make the decision. I know which I favor, and I think you probably get a sense of that from this video. Truth is, in my opinion, knots are very similar to skills, and it's about knowing when a specific skill or knot is better used for a different purpose. In relation to the trucker's hitch versus the taut-line hitch, and with this type of experiment, using them as a ridgeline, I'd say the ridgeline is better tied when actually involving both knots. Now, as promised, here's a link to my video, the taut-line versus the midshipman's hitch, and I highly recommend you check that video out to see the value of the midshipman's hitch. Now, if you like this video, please give it the thumbs up, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Okay? Thanks for watching.